Good afternoon. The August 14th meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust will be in order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the July 17th meeting.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the minutes of the July 17th meeting. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is the consent docket. Number of items. Are there any of them that we need to talk about separately?
I move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Are there, does anybody have any items that we need to pull out separately?
I've got a couple of questions, but they don't have to be pulled out. It's minor questions.
Okay.
On 3A, you characterize this interceptor that carries 72% of the wastewater generated within the Oklahoma City. Is that a single line?
Yes.
And so if it fails, why? Put the nail down all the toilets. They talk about, in this write-up, additional repairs. Are we doing some work on it now?
Yes.
Other than just the survey?
We have done some minimal repairs. I'll ask Mr. Samandi to help me with those details.
Have we ever considered a second line in there to sort of back up the 72-inch?
No, sir, but the master plan describes reliability and options.
We have done some work in the past on the 96-inch line. No, we haven't considered putting another line in there yet, but it's a major line. It's a major facility for us. And we want to make sure for the future it's structurally sound and safe to carry the sewage. This is a detailed inspection of the sanitary sewer line. It's got a liner inside to protect against corrosion and that kind of adverse effect.
Well, I know 96-inch line would be expensive, but it seems like as much as we rely on this line and as much capacity it is carrying right now, we got to consider some kind of a backup on there.
We'll follow up. Thank you.
And which other one?
Mr. Chairman, it was on item 3D. And this is just a question for my own edification. This is the 7th change order on this particular project, and it brings the total of the change orders to about 9.97% of the contract. Is that a limit? At 10%, do we have to rebid it or do something else to it?
Greg.
When the 3D, this is a project that is being done for ODOT.
I'm sorry, I got the wrong project number. It's 3U rather than 3D. 3U is a change order on the Toka pipeline.
Oh.
Now, are there pipe stations at all these towns along the way?
Yes.
Okay. Craig, if you could help us explain the difference between change orders and amendments, I think that might be helpful.
Of course. Under the Competitive Bidding Act, the government entity, the awarding government entity, can issue change orders up to 10% of a project that is over $1 million, 15% below $1 million, and then there's a middle threshold where it's a greater of the two. Change orders are changes that are not anticipated by the contract. They differ from amendments in that amendments are items in which we have unit prices for. So if we determined we thought we needed 7 pumps and we want an 8th pump just like the other 7 that we already have a bid price for, that would be an amendment as opposed to a change order because we already have a competitive price. Whereas a change order might be a situation in which we're changing the design in such a way that we're adding something that we don't have a price for.
And does that 10% limit apply to change orders?
Yes.
So this 10% on this project, yes.
So what happens if we get to a change order number 8 that takes us above?
Then we may have to bid that change order separately as a separate job.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the confusion on the identification of that project.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. If there are no other questions, voting please. Consent docket's approved. The next is a concurrence docket. There are 3 items on the concurrence docket.
Move the concurrence docket, subject to individual consideration.
Motion and a second to approve the concurrence docket. Are there items to be discussed separately? Hearing none, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved. The next item is emergency construction resolutions. All these next items under item 5 require 4 votes for approval, and since there are only 3 of us here, I'd entertain a motion to continue all items under item 5.
Move that we affirm. Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue, but it will be to the next,
That's September 11th,
to September 11th,
August 28th.
August 28th. Any other bids? Voting, please. They're all continued. Next item are items for individual consideration. The first one is item 6A. It's ratification of agreement with Innova Solutions.
Mr. Chairman, this agenda item makes improvements to our call center to help make people who are on the phones more aware of what's going on, the workload, and other management tools to keep us answering phones as quickly as possible and answering as many calls as possible.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 6A. Voting, please. Item 6A is approved. Item 6B, it's an executive, to enter an executive session. I understand that we do need executive session.
I move we go into executive session.
Motion and a second to enter executive session. Voting, please. We will enter executive session at the heel of the docket. Next item is item C, 6C. It's also an executive session matter.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to move it to executive session. Voting, please. It'll also be moved to the heel of the docket. Next item is item 7, items from trustees. Other matters from trustees.
I would want to compliment staff on the, I know the summer's not over yet, but we certainly survived this summer in some very significant weather conditions in much better shape than last year. And the improvements that you've done for line improvements and temporary pump improvements and plant improvements and everything we've done, I think have really paid off dividends. And yeah, we know we've got other projects that we need to try to complete before next summer, but the system has held up really overall very, very well this year.
Thanks very much on behalf of all the people who contributed.
Any other items? Hearing none, we'll move on to general manager's reports under item 8. The first one is the status report from the Utility Department for the period ending June 30th, 2012.
Mr. Chairman, water demand is down over the last few days. We started the month of August pumping 1 billion gallons of water in the first 5 days of the month. We produced a total of 5.3 billion gallons, 200 million gallons under the all-time record from last July, in July of 2012. It's been a busy time. Lake levels are, of course, down. They're in a better position than they were at this time last year. And we believe that summer is, except for the next couple of days, over. We're looking forward to being in the low 90s the next few days, and water demand commensurately dropping.
Are we presently bumping from McGee Creek to Atoka?
We are about 78 million gallons a day, and about 83 million gallons a day from Atoka. Atoka is down about 7 feet. McGee Creek is down 2 feet from the flood pool. Lake Draper has lost 2 feet since we started the summer because of demand and evaporation. And Lake Hefner is down almost 10 feet, but about 6 feet higher than it was at this time last year. So
Thank you.
we feel good, we feel bad. We're excited to have been successful through the summer. We did have pressure problems, and we'll be bringing you some recommended projects to help, again, further improvements to help where there were low-pressure delivery issues this summer.
Any other comments?
Now, sir, Lisa Harple has prepared a report on encroachments on the Lake Hafner Reservation and is here to help answer questions about this. The staff is following procedures to help remove private property from public land. And I understand that there are some citizens who wish to speak to you on this agenda item.
Okay, the first citizen request is from Tracy Underwood.
Hello,
You need to state your name and address.
Tracy
for the record.
Underwood, and I'm here about the encroachment. I live at 3729 Northwest 70th, and I'm also here to talk for my neighbors as well. To my understanding, we've been notified back in April of some encroachment. We've lived in this property for 3.5 years. The encroachment issue was our sprinkler system that's been there since the 70s. Also, I don't know if you have pictures or not, but of a swing set that's been there about 10 years. Then I found out recently there's also a pavement involved going around the flower beds that's been there since 1986. The property line seems to continue to change for us. Now, my concern is with my neighbors even, they've had things there for 40 years, like the rock bed garden that was put in 40 years ago. Now they're being held liable for that. It's things that I don't think as homeowners we should be financially responsible for things that were already put there in place for many, many years. And the city has never brought it to anybody's attention that that was an issue. And I just want to discuss it further with you guys. The back of that field has been taken care of for many, many years. Dr. Cowden, I'm sorry, he just sent me a text because he's one of the neighbors also. And he said he did it for 10 to 15 years, and then Charlie Leslie, another resident, did it for 10 to 15 years, taking care of that backfield because the city wasn't coming out on a regular basis. We continue as homeowners, we mow as far out as the sprinkler system is because we thought that was our property. So we've always mowed, we spray it, it's taken care of every week. And then recently, a couple months ago, we had a storm come through. There was a lot of tree damage. We called the city. It took them, they never showed up. I mean, it was 2 weeks going on 3 weeks. We were not going to allow that to stay there. So we spent $1,100 just having that removed because we don't want critters and other animals coming up to the property because it's very common for that to happen back there. So I just wanted to come visit with you guys more. I did talk to Brett yesterday, and so I understand, to some degree, where you guys are coming from on it. But I don't understand when these things have just been there for so long. And I know where the original argument came from. It came from a dispute from some neighbors between them down the street, and that's when the city got involved. I just feel like as homeowners, we've been taking care of y'all's property for a long, long time, and we would continue, to do so. And there's another neighbor here. She'll be up to visit with you guys as well. But do you have any questions? Because this is my first time to present to you guys, so I just wanted.
Could you give some background on this? I mean, I know we've done regular sweeps of encroachments for I know at least 25 years that we've been doing that on a fairly regular basis. But it appears from the aerials that there's like a gazebo and a building and some other things. Have those been there long term?
We've looked at various aerial photographs, so we have some sense of how long several of the improvements have been there. It is true that this was brought to my attention as a part of a neighborhood dispute, but there's no question we surveyed the land and we got stuff that doesn't belong to us on public land. We're trying to be good stewards of the property, and it belongs to the entire community of
Right, but there's different categories here. A sprinkler system and a rock garden are at one level, in my opinion, and a gazebo and a building are at a different level.
I agree with you about that.
And so what are we talking about here? I mean, I assume different neighbors have different levels of encroachment.
They do, and we're working with them individually. There's no question that the gazebo can't be used by the public. It's not a public facility. There's also a multi-family, a large storm shelter knowingly put on public land a few years ago. Of course, I don't want to take out a storm shelter. On the other hand, it's not a public facility. It's not dedicated to us. We don't. It's a problem. So my concern is protection of the public's land, and that's the purpose of the encroachment practice. Then that's what we're doing.
And I assume one of the problems is that we may not care if a picnic table's out there, but the picnic table goes in, and then all of a sudden the swing set goes in, and the next thing that the gazebo goes, the next neighbor puts in a gazebo, and it accelerates from the,
Yes, and
a little thing goes into a big thing.
There's no doubt that it has.
Excuse me, the gazebo has been there for, years, as far as I know. At least 10, easily. Unfortunately, the couple that live there, they're both deceased. And so the homeowner that's there now has only been there a little over a year.
So what is your specific request today?
Well, I don't agree with having to remove the sprinkler system at all. I don't think that's necessary. It takes care of the yard. I also disagree with my neighbors even having to remove that rock garden that's been there 40 years. He tried to take a jackhammer to it, and you can't move it. It is embedded into the ground, so then somebody, whether them or the city, is going to spend a fortune trying to remove that. To my understanding, I know you guys keep saying it's a public area, but I'm kind of confused because there's a lock on the gate to get back there. There's no public back there except the neighbors, except us. We'll walk out there. That's it.
I think that's the point. It's not your property. It's the public's property. I think that's the point. That's what an encroachment is.
I understand
By its very
that.
nature, it is excluding someone from somewhere place they have a right to be. And you exclude the public when you lock the gate and have a facility back there.
I don't put a lock on there. I don't know. That lock's been there for years, to my
We put a lock on
understanding.
that. Yeah, we're the source of the lock, and that's because we have people driving inappropriately across our land, off-roading. That's the reason the gate's locked. Lisa?
Chairman and trustees. By the way, we actually have problems with the lock on this gate. It's been cut at least 3 times in the last 2 months that we've been going out and periodically inspecting the area. And this area was also the location probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago where we had a contractor illegally dumping concrete back here. So it habitually is a problem where people trespass. And I agree with you in relation to the sprinklers. The sprinklers probably wouldn't even have been noted, but the playground equipment caused us to go in and do a closer inspection. That's when we found sprinklers and rock.
So how many homes were we talking about here, Lisa?
Right now, we're talking about 5 homes.
So you can kind of tell from the aerials, exactly which ones.
And actually, in this area, the neighbors that are farther west, they are adhering to the property lines. A lot of those homeowners still have gates in place. It's in this area where I think that's exactly, what happened. One person encroached, other people saw, and the neighbors started encroaching farther over because this particular area is where the majority of the encroachments are.
Now, if somebody chose to, could they get a revocable permit for us for a sprinkler system or for a rock garden?
Yes.
So they could come back on an individual basis and ask for permission to do that. And so then we, instead of lumping them all together, we could separate and consider a sprinkler system or a playground as opposed to maybe a building or a gazebo.
Yes, temporary we generally consider truly temporary facilities for a
Well,
revocable permit.
But a sprinkler system, I mean, it is, you know, because sprinkler systems can be in the right-of-way in the front, in the area, so that's I don't know, it's not right-of-way though, Craig, I understand the difference between right-of-way and I know you're giving me that look, but I do understand the difference between trust estate and right-of-way. But I assume we could give a permit and allow.
Trustees could issue permits.
I did have a conversation with one of the homeowners there who expressed an interest in still maintaining that area because he enjoyed the green belt. And we could enter into an agreement if there's a homeowners association, a joint agreement where we could agree for them to maintain that area as far as the mowing and the sprinklers, that type of situation. But the encroachments themselves, that's doesn't comply with our policy, our current policy.
Mr. Chairman, trustees, I think one of the concerns you get into, and there's a playground equipment on city property.
Liability?
Yeah, that, you know, if it's not meeting the park standards and it's, and someone gets hurt, then, you know, they're going to be after us. And so, there's standards, you know.
I totally understand.
And the people that put the storm system up, we were informed that they knew that this was an encroachment when it was put in there.
Is that the big, is that
There's a
the,
storm shelter.
is that the, next to the pool there, is that the thing behind that, or is that a building, or?
There's a picture of it.
Excuse me, the storm shelter is associated with the rock garden. That's the rock
Oh, that's
garden.
over here.
Yeah.
Yes, that's,
So with the house with the pool, that looks like a big building or some type, what is that behind there?
the house with the pool,
Yeah.
that, if it's by the gazebo.
No, the gazebo's round.
Because the pool, the house with the pool is the one, that one was a gentleman that complied. That's the very first picture on your attachment where he had a storage shed on our property, and he removed it.
Oh, okay, so that's very good.
Yes. There was a storage shed on this side right here, and the property owner removed it.
Okay, so that's why he doesn't have a white boundary around his house?
Yes.
Got it, I was confused by that. Okay.
There are some options open, it sounds like. The final paragraph of the staff report indicates that the staff plans to continue to engage the property owners and try to work with you. I think if they were explained to that there are some other options, as the manager points out, they could then decide whether to try to avail themselves of those options, and it would be determined that way.
We would be more than happy to meet with them.
I think that's the best thing we can do at this point,
Okay.
especially since other people have complied by removing. One picture appears obvious that somebody's removed a structure.
Yes.
So,
The gentleman's complied, yes.
I think Ms. Hannah also wants to speak. Is that?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Hanna. I live at 3717 Northwest 70th. I don't have a lot of new things to say. When we bought the house, we've only been in our house since March. We were not notified that that was not our property line there. We assumed where our fence was our property line. We did have an RV, which we did remove from the property, so all we currently have encroaching is a fence. We currently maintain our area, we mow it, we water it. Along with our other neighbors, we had a lot of tree damage in that last storm that all have fallen outside of our property, outside of where the fence is now. And again, the city has not cleaned them up. They're all still laying there. You know, we will maintain it, we do maintain it, and we will pick those up. They are not in our property where our fence is. But I guess I don't understand how it's hurting anybody for my fence to be extended out there where I'm taking care of it. It keeps you guys from having to take care of it. It's not creating any liability for anyone. So, yes, if I can enter into an agreement or a lease, or I can sign a release of liability if anything happens on that portion of my land. I would just love to do something to be able to keep my yard. As far as the other neighbors, I mean, this is betterments to the property. It's not that they're decreasing the city's property. They've increased the value with what they're doing. So, I don't know. And as far as the lock being cut and the concrete being dumped by a contractor, we bought our house as a repossessed house. We've improved it greatly in the months we've lived there. We had a pool contractor come out. We were told when we bought the house by the homeowners association that there was a combination on that gate and that we were welcome to use that access because it's right off of our backyard. So we have used the access. We haven't cut any locks. I don't know who's cutting locks. But our contractor didn't dump concrete. He has put materials there, which we have cleaned up. So I don't know if it was dumped or not, but we've cleaned up what they've done. So I would love to be notified of anything I can do, though, to keep my fence line where it is.
Well, I think someone on our staff here is willing to sit down and explain to you what your options are, and we can try to work something out.
Anything else the other property owners could do, so.
Yeah, I would have to say that when you start fencing off city property as your own, I would have personally a problem with that. I mean, I think if the fence went away and you maintained it and your yard extended out there, but when you start fencing it off, I think that's beyond probably, that would be personally acceptable to me.
I've only been there for 4 or 5 months, and it's been 4 years, so I didn't do it. And I wasn't aware it wasn't my property.
So you didn't have a property survey when you bought that property?
I'm sure there was, but once again, I didn't read the 80 pages of paperwork when I bought the house. And there is a picture on there, and it shows all of the land. So, I mean, I didn't measure it off and see exactly where that was. There is a line where I've looked at it since this has all come up. But I would have to get out and measure it to see where that line hit on the survey. I don't know if it hits exactly where y'all measured it or not, or what mine says. I could get out and see.
You know, if you take a look at an aerial, it's actually pretty clear where the line is. I mean, you can tell just by going down. So I think it's you just buy everybody else's that are out there.
Well, I can see that now, but I
really,
didn't know that when I bought the house. That wasn't an issue then.
yeah, I understand.
Okay. Well, if you will meet
Lisa Havel.
with Lisa afterward, I think she can probably help you get started on some kind of a path that you can get a decision on it.
Thank you.
The last item on the agenda is a report on the water system weather conditions response.
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, staff is going to begin pursuing water conservation options that will help our customers and begin to mitigate our peak demand on very hot days. We are researching through other water utility technical organizations best practices for the kinds of things we might hope to do, which would be to help people make certain they're getting the best out of their water use. Our peaking in these very hot summer days is directly related to yard irrigation and some cooling towers in our community. And then we would proceed with other options that might make an impact on our overall water supply. So both pursuing continued operation of wastewater treatment reuse facilities and other options to manage how we use our water supply.
Mr. Chairman, may I go back to item B for a second? Did the city, when they were out there doing their investigation, set the property corners on those lots?
We have surveyed this.
We have a survey and what all the points and everything, it's all laid out.
Have we provided that to the property owners?
We can give them a copy of the survey.
I think it might be helpful as they decide whether, if they have to move their fence, how far it will have to be moved, that sort of thing. And then secondly, I would like to ask that the staff provide some progress reports periodically, hopefully progress reports, on how this project's going forward.
back to the last item on the agenda, one of the things that I have concerns about is Oklahoma City has done a really good job, in my opinion, of making sure that the water supply is adequate. The result of that has been that we haven't had to go through some of the problems that other communities have had to go through concerning rationing, because we've done a really good job of protecting the supply. But as we know, and as we've seen for the last couple of years, there are threats, not on the distant horizon, but on the near horizon that might change all that. I mean, if this drought continues and high temperatures continue, as we've seen, the supply that we've rightfully been so proud of over the years may not have the projected life that we've always thought it did. And so I'd like to see us seriously consider long-term conservation practices, even in times when we don't absolutely have to do it. Oklahoma City does not use a lot of extra water, but I think most people horticultural people will tell you that we probably water our yards too much, and that's treated water that we could be preserving, or we can leave it in a lake somewhere where it didn't have to be treated. I'd like for us just to look at that and make sure that we're being good stewards of what we have on into the future.
Mr. Chairman, Marcia's prepared some information along those lines and a very broad look at different things that she'll be bringing back to the trustees here in the next couple of meetings. I don't know exactly when you're scheduled to do that, Marcia, but it's really broad, including people to help consult with landscaping, meter checks, sensors in the sprinkler systems, information on appliances and that type of stuff, to gearing it up to a different rate structure that would be, we would break away and have residential rates where the usage would go up in climbing blocks. It would, from a financial standpoint, limit some of the uses, and looking at a number of things that are done in different cities. So I think she's going to bring some options back to you within the next
We talked about that before.
Next few weeks.
I realized she was doing some of that. But I think it's just important that we prepare the public for the fact that we're going to take a much more serious look at conservation.
And I think it's going to be a cultural thing, that it's probably going to take some time, and we need to start now to educate and to change lifestyles and whether it's grass types people use, maybe.
Well, I think this last couple of summers has really brought that forward, because I think historically we have thought we had tens of years at least before we started to have to worry about it. But I think we can look at what happened at Canton this year and see that we made that release because we had to have it, and now Canton is desperately short of water there. We didn't do anything we shouldn't have done, but perhaps if we'd had better conservation practices in place for the last couple of years, that we wouldn't have had to take so much water from there. So that's really what I'm looking at, just an overall Canton to McGee Creek look at what we could be doing better. So
our intended approach is information, assistance, options for folks so that we don't interrupt people's lives and are helpful.
Have we ever looked at the cost of adding capacity to our water pumping plants versus the cost of customer demand management?
No, sir, we have not.
Because there may be something we can give away so many dollars worth of assistance and still spend less than adding capacity to our stations, and cut down our demand and maybe our usage as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your help on this issue.
If there's nothing else to come before the trust, we will retire to executive session to be back at that conclusion of that.
Your executive